So welcome along. This is our second week of lunchtime webinars that we're running in September. I'm Julianne Bergen. My colleague Mary is also on the call there. She will be kind of keeping an eye on the chat. So if anybody has any questions or anything like that, you can pop them into the chat, or we will have a few minutes at the end as well. I'll stop the recording for people to ask questions if they have any. So as I say, we're doing 4 short presentations on software for literacy in schools. So this is for children who might be following a more academic type of curriculum. And the idea behind these is to assist with the literacy side or the text entry side of things. So today we're covering Dragon Naturally Speaking. I'm covering that one. Then my colleague Mary will be doing Read Speaker Text Aid tomorrow and Text Help on Wednesday. And then I'll be back on Thursday covering Splash City Maths. So each presentation will consist of some information on the software, a live demonstration, and then kind of how to set it up and use it. And we'll give you examples of alternatives if we feel there's an appropriate alternative out there. So there may not be a huge amount in the alternatives list, but just to be aware of that. As mentioned, we're not being paid to do these presentations. These are softwares that we use regularly or we feel are good options for students. So we're just sharing that information. So as I say, today one, we're looking at Dragon Naturally Speaking. So Dragon Naturally Speaking is speech recognition software. The idea being that you can speak and your words will appear on screen. So it's an alternative to handwriting or typing for students who might find that difficult. So it's created by a company called Nuance. They have offices both in the UK and in America. So they're where we need to go for assistance is through the UK office. They have a software version for Windows and an app version that's available for Android and iOS. So I'm concentrating on the software version today. They are currently on version 16 of the software that was released, I think earlier on this year, probably around March, I think. And the current price for it, it's a perpetual license, so you only pay it once, is €780. Quite an expensive piece of software. There is also, as I mentioned, the app version, which is about $150 per year. That app version is available for iOS and Android. It's not as fully featured as the software version. Plus, we find it difficult at times to get subscription-based software funded by the Department of Education. So we have a tendency, if somebody's going to be a user of Dragon Naturally Speaking, we tend to go for the software version because it has a one-off price, which the department are more willing, I won't say very willing, but more willing to fund if it's appropriate for the student. In previous versions of the software, they had a professional and an at-home version. The at-home version was cheaper, but didn't have certain features in there, such as control of Excel. So if you had a student who's going to be using Excel for business studies or maths or whatever purposes, you didn't have that control. Plus a couple of other things. You could only have one microphone attached and things like that. So there was limitations there. We tended to look for funding for the professional version. There is only the professional version now with version 16. So the idea behind Dragon Naturally Speaking and most speech recognition products that are out there is to capture speech using a microphone. So the idea is that you speak into a microphone. You do need a good quality microphone, whether that's a headset microphone like I'm going to be using today. I'm actually not using this at the moment to talk to you. I'm actually using a microphone on my desk. So that's what you're hearing me through on Teams, but I'll be using this headset. Noise cancelling means that there is actually 2 kind of microphones or 2 receptors on the microphone itself, on the boom, or if it's a desk microphone, on the microphone itself. One facing inwards to the person and picking up their speech. The other microphone is outward facing and monitoring what noise is in the room and removing that from what is being processed. So a good quality noise cancelling microphone is really essential to get speech recognition working well for you. There's lots of brands out there, Plantronics. I'm trying to think of the other ones. Plantronics is kind of one of the go-tos that I use, but there's loads of really good brands out there. But just be aware that some gaming microphones, for example, won't have the noise cancelling ability, or if it's a desk microphone without noise cancelling, you might be picking up noise from everywhere. You have the option of wired and wireless headsets. So wired ones actually plug in usually through the USB port. Wireless ones might have a little dongle that plugs in, or it might be Bluetooth, and means you've no wires connecting you to the computer. So for example, if I'm working with somebody who's a wheelchair user, I tend to go for wireless options so they can leave them on and move away from the desk without dragging everything with them. It also means, for example, for students who need to move and change position regularly, that wireless headsets means that they can stand up, they can move around the room, they can bounce on a gym ball, whatever they need to help regulate themselves. So really good idea to look at wireless headsets. As I say, you can also get desk headsets or desk microphones. So they'd be just sitting on your desk, don't have a headpiece, so just be aware of that. And you can also use dictaphones. Dictaphones are kind of like mini recorders. So for example, if somebody's out and about, they can record and then kind of send that recording through the software for dictation purposes afterwards. That may not be used a lot for students, for example, but it might be used for people who are using it for workplace situations. So just be aware of that. The idea behind it is that it uses algorithms to analyze the sounds. So it has a profile in there. Once you log into Dragon, you'll kind of see there's options about choosing different base languages or base accents. We go for the standard one. We don't have an alternative, unfortunately, an Irish accented one there, but you'll see ones for like Indian accents, or I think American accent is in there as well. So we tend to just go with the UK one purely because the spelling patterns we use are based on the UK language rather than American. However, the idea behind Dragon, the reason why it's a market leader, is that it can be trained to individual voices. So, for example, heavy accents, we've got a lot of regional accents in Ireland. We don't all speak like BBC News readers. So it can take into account that and learn with you over time if you make corrections along the way. So I'll be talking a little bit more about corrections in a few minutes, but the idea being if the software makes a mistake, if you correct it, it should learn from that correction and in future move forward. It can also be used for people who've got non-standard speech. So for example, somebody with dysarthria. The idea being that if somebody's speech is always consistent, even though it might not be the correct pronunciation, as long as it's consistent, Dragon can work with that. So you can train it to your own voice, your own way of saying words. It also uses context and machine learning to determine what words you're speaking. So the great example that used to be in the training materials was ice cream. So am I saying I, as a person, scream, as in yell out loud? Or am I saying ice cream, as in the nice dessert that's cold? So it uses context, the full version of the sentence, to figure out which variation I meant to say. One being a noun and one being a verb phrase in that case. So it uses the context to really help with the ensuring that the words predicted are the most appropriate. It will make errors, I'm not going to lie to you, but this is the sort of thing that helps reduce the amount of errors that are there. It will learn with you over time as well. You can input, hopefully I get a chance to show you that, input maybe vocabulary that you're using very often. You can go in through the vocabulary tools and upload a document, for example. You can also, the idea being, the end result is that you're transcribing the outcome on screen. So into your Microsoft Word document, into an email, into Microsoft Excel, that the output is transcribed on screen. So that's the idea behind this. It takes the information you're inputting through the microphone and the result is text output. It can also be used to control mouse functions and navigate your computer as well. So for those people who have limited physical ability but good speech, it can provide them a way of using a computer hands-free, that they don't need to touch the keyboard or mouse, that they can navigate around fully just using their voice. And just a little caveat at the end there, for anybody who's using Dragon, you might need to look at additional software. So for example, software around literacy support, mind mapping, and I'll come back and describe why you might need to look at those in a few minutes. So as I mentioned there, it's kind of got two main populations that we would see it being used with. Those with physical disabilities, that prevents keyboard access, so again allows them to navigate their computer hands-free. However, for certain physical disabilities, you might need to take into account breath support for speech. I mentioned there that it uses context to determine which words that you're using. If you can only say one or two words on each breath, the software isn't getting that context. So it requires somebody who's got reasonably good breath support for speech. So for example, somebody with a severe cerebral palsy might find that difficult if they don't have the breath support for speech there. And that consistency as well. As say, it doesn't have to be 100% correct in the pronunciation, it just needs to be consistent. For those with literacy difficulties, it allows them to get content down on paper in a virtual sense, but it can be printed off then without having to worry about spelling. They just say the word, it is typed in automatically. It'll also give them support around words that sound the same, but are spelled differently given the context. So you're there, there, and there. There quotes, they are over there. Those kind of words that sound similar. No, not synonyms. Can't remember the word, I'm sorry. But it brings those together. However, the person does need to be able to proofread what they've written, that to make sure that the computer understood them, what they meant to say is actually what the computer took on board. So they might need support around making corrections. So ways you can possibly do that are using text-to-speech. There is an inbuilt text-to-speech option. Hopefully I'll get a chance to show you that one. Or you might use alternative literacy support packages. Just to say, for example, text help that Mary will be demonstrating Wednesday is actually designed to work well with Dragon. Those two pieces of software are very compatible. So it will show up errors, that grammatical or spelling errors that might not make sense in that particular phrase or in that particular context. And as I say, so you might need those additional literacy supports. The other thing that you might need is, and I'm a big fan of this, anybody who's attended a workshop with me probably knows, I'm a big fan of mind mapping. So mind mapping can help you plan what you want to say. One of the things about Dragon is you can get content down on screen, no problem. We speak at a rate of somewhere between 80 and 120 words a minute, I think. I'm probably speaking a little bit faster than that right now. Whereas typing, it's much slower. Most people are somewhere in that 60 to 80 words per minute. Even really good typists probably get up to about 100 words a minute. So we need to kind of think about what we want to say before we say it. Otherwise, we end up with a stream of consciousness. So having mind mapping software there will help with that. If you've kind of planned out what you want to say, it will result in much more coherent documents rather than long rambling paragraphs that go all over the place. So as I say, I'm going to demonstrate the software to you. I'm going to show you how to set up a profile. There's a couple of bits and pieces I want to just bring your attention to. We're going to use then Dragon to dictate a piece of text, talking about how to insert punctuation and the importance of corrections as well. We're going to use Dragon a little bit for computer control, how you might navigate around and use controls in your computer to access other functions. And we're also going to look very briefly at some settings as well. This is not a complete guide to Dragon. This is an overview, unfortunately, and we've got limited time here today, but I do want to show you the basics here. I do have a number of kind of cheat sheets that I've created over the years, which I'm very happy to share. If anybody would like a copy of those cheat sheets, just send me an email. I'll put my email address back up at the end of the presentation, so you can email me and I'll send them on to you. They're basically kind of ones around the basics, ones around using Dragon with Chrome web browser if somebody wants to access that. Trying to remember what other ones I have. I've got 3 or 4 of them, plus I can give you access to the full manual. Now the full manual I think is like 120, 140 pages long. I use it as a reference. So like if somebody comes to me and said, I want to know how to underline a phrase in my document, go to the manual so that you can kind of look it up quickly and figure out what you need to do in that case. Okay, so I'm going to stop the presentation here for a few minutes. I will return, but I'm going to share my screen now, and hopefully this will work. And it's not allowing me to share sound. Okay, hopefully I can share. I may not be able to demonstrate the playback option, but hopefully I can demonstrate everything. Sorry, my sound is doing something funny. This is what happens when you have a couple of different microphones on your computer. So I'm just going to share my screen. My Word document. Okay, at the top of my screen there, hopefully you can see the Dragon toolbar. This is what they call the modern toolbar. You might see it's slightly different in different options that you have. So you can also have the classic Dragon toolbar. So this is kind of, I can move this one around the screen, and you can just have it. Sorry, if I go back in here, go back into new Dragon bar. You can also have it that it is only in the tray down at the bottom of your screen, kind of along the taskbar at the bottom. I don't recommend that for beginner users. I prefer that they can see the toolbar at the top. However, what some people like is this auto collapse option. So I'm going to turn that on, and what happens is after a couple of seconds of not interacting with the software, it should kind of minimize down. And yeah, so it's minimized down there. So if somebody wants something a little bit more discreet, that can be the way to go. I'm unticking that because I do want to show you a few bits and pieces along here today. So the first thing I'm going to do is just show you how to set up a new profile. So if you click on the profile icon there, and you can choose new user profile. When you start up the software, it will also give you the option for creating a new user or selecting a previous user. So I'm going to select a new one. And it gives you a little introduction here. So I'm just going to click next here. This is kind of guiding you through and helping set up a voice profile for you. So I'm going to call this September 2023 as my profile here. You can see here it's given the option for whether this is for your voice or somebody else's. So the idea behind the licensing here is that it's one user, one license. So that user can install, I think, on 2 devices, but technically you're not supposed to share licenses across. But this is giving you the option of if you have recorded somebody else's speech, like we mentioned with a dictaphone earlier on, you can use that here. I'm clicking next. It's asked me then to select your region. You can see United Kingdom is already selected for me there. I don't have a choice. And then I can select my accent. So you've got Australian, Indian, Southeast Asian, or accent not otherwise specified. So I tend to go with standard there. I'm clicking next. And it's asking me to choose which microphone that I'm using. You can see on the right hand side here, I've got like 4 different options there for microphones. Sorry, 5. The last one was actually not a microphone, to be quite honest with you. And you can see as I'm talking that there's little green bars moving up and down. The microphone I'm talking to you through is this 3rd option there. So I'm a little bit distant from that microphone. So you can see I'm getting 1, maybe 2 bars on that. Whereas my headset microphone, which is very close to my mouth, you can see I'm getting 4 or 5 bars there at times as well. So that one's much closer and picking up the signal much better. It then allows you to move on, and it's asking you to position your microphone. So as I say, most people opt to use a headset microphone, and you can see there it should be kind of 1 inch from the corner of your mouth. So the idea behind that is that it's not directly in front of your mouth where it might pick up breathing sounds. It's slightly to one side or the other where it's actually just picking up the speech. And you can see there, if you're using a built-in microphone or a desktop microphone, position yourself about 1 to 2 feet away. So the next thing it does, it asks you to read a passage. For some of our people that we might be using this with, they may not be in a position to read that passage. That could be due to literacy difficulties. There is quite complex language in here. or it could be due to visual impairment. You cannot actually increase the size in that unless you go off and use an external magnifier. It doesn't actually allow you to magnify the text here directly. But what I've done in the past is I use that start button and I'll click stop and I'll whisper the next phrase or the next sentence, depending on the person's ability, and they just repeat it. I turn the microphone back on and they repeat it. So we have worked around this. If you've got a good quality noise cancelling microphone, you can leave it on because it's ignoring you and only picking up the sounds from the student's own side. The idea behind this is it's starting to build your speech profile. The other thing it is doing is figuring out what's foreground noise and what's background noise. So when you see a comma, if you see a full stop, just pause for a second so it can determine what's your speech and what's background. I'm going to start reading this now, and just to show you what happens. I am reading this text out loud, clearly and naturally. I will continue to use this tone when I dictate with the product. Right now, I'm giving Dragon a chance to adapt to my voice and audio environment. As I talk, Dragon is checking the quality of the audio input and adjusting some settings. Good audio input is essential for accurate speech recognition. To achieve. So I only got as far as here, so it's got enough information. Some people might have to read the whole thing and then may have to start again reading from the top. You can see I got as far as here before I clicked complete. Next, it will take those sounds, it'll go off, it'll start processing them. I'm going to stop it if I can. No, I shouldn't have clicked next there. Because I was hoping to go back and, oh, sugar, should not have done that. Use profile I've already established just so you could see that I don't need to go through everything here. It does take you through another few options where in relation to providing feedback to the company, so you can have it that if it crashes or has error messages, it sends those back to the manufacturer. You can choose to opt out of those. It will also ask if you want to learn from previous emails and documents you've already on your computer. So I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to switch over. Sorry, cancel this actually. I'm just going to go back to the profile that I had before. Just to talk you through the bar up here at the top, at the moment it is just loading that profile. You can see little green boxes will pop up here, kind of give me a progress report. It takes about 30 seconds to do so. At this time, Dragon is not actually listening to me. You can see it's the microphone icon is in a red dot there. So it's off at the moment. We'll talk about the states it can be in 1 or 2 seconds. And I think it's loaded. So as I say, I can say anything I like right now and it won't dictate it. It's only when I turn the microphone on, and in this case I do actually have to click on it, or I can use a hotkey shortcut to activate the microphone. Dragon is now listening to me. Full stop. I can ask it to stop listening by saying the phrase "go to sleep." Full stop. Go to sleep. Okay, I just wanted to point out something I did there. When I used a full sentence, I can ask it to stop listening by saying the phrase "go to sleep." That, because it's part of a phrase, it won't actually carry out that command. The command "go to sleep" will only work to turn off the microphone when I have a small silence before and after the command. So at the moment, the microphone icon is kind of in a bluey teal color. So it is actually in a sleep mode, but I don't know if you can see this on your computer. The little bubbles to the right of the microphone are kind of going up and down, depending on if I'm talking or not talking. So it is actually still listening to me, but it's not actually dictating anything at the moment. So it will only start dictating once I give it the wake up phrase. So in this case, the wake up phrase is "wake up." So you can see there, it didn't do it because I didn't pause beforehand. So if I do it again, Wake up. New line. Dragon is now listening to me again. Exclamation mark. When using Dragon, it is important to use punctuation, comma, otherwise the software will not define sentences. Full stop. If I don't use punctuation, sentences will run on and may not have an end in sight, even though I may naturally pause and start a new sentence. It will continue it as if it is a continuation of the previous utterance. Go to sleep. So this is where there's a certain amount of literacy ability a person needs to have. They have to have the ability to know when to insert punctuation, or otherwise you just get these long sentences running on, constant stream of thought, but no kind of coherent output. Just going to go through a couple of the commands just to show you how they might work. So I'm just going to show you how to do some editing and formatting very quickly. Wake up. Select Dragon. 1. Bold that. Undo that. Select Dragon. Choose 1. Bold that. Underline that. Insert before go to sleep. Open quote. Insert in after sleep. Delete that. Insert after sleep. Close quote. Go to end. Select if I don't through previous utterance. Delete that. New line. Go to sleep. So there you just had a brief overview of me doing some things like formatting, bolding, underlining. You can also do things like changing fonts, font styles as well as font sizes. You can choose the styles. So for example, at the top of the screen there, you can see all the different heading styles. You can actually select one of those. You can insert bullet points. You can do all this. You could also see me there selecting and inserting the cursor in different points in the document. So before go to sleep, I'll put in the quote, open quotes, and afterwards put in close quotes. I could select paragraphs, sentences, individual words, and delete those as well. So you can really use it to manipulate your document, and you can do with the keyboard, you can do with your voice in this case. It works really well with the Microsoft Office range of products. It works very well with the downloaded version of the Word and PowerPoint and all those. If you're using Office online, it's a little bit trickier. It'll allow you to do a certain amount of formatting, but not everything. So just bear that in mind. If you're working with students, they do need to have a downloadable version. I also mentioned there you can use it for computer control. So one of the things you can do is just say click, and for example, if I wanted to click on any of the tabs at the top there, wake up, click layout, click orientation, click landscape, go to sleep. So that will work with any of the commands that are in the ribbon at the top in the menu bars up there. You can also use the mouse grid if, for example, you're working in a program that isn't compatible with Dragon directly. You can use kind of overlaying commands to navigate your way around. So, for example, wake up. Mouse grid. go to sleep. Sorry, I should have explained that before I went into it. Mouse grid kind of subdivides the screen into 9, and you can then just call out the numbers, and it keeps subdividing until you get to the icon that you want. So for example, if I wanted to minimize down this red window, I could use the command, but I'm just going to do it using the mouse grid. Wake up. Wake up. Mouse grid. 3, 3, 1, 3, mouse click. Go to sleep. And there you can kind of see it's minimized down the window for me. So if you're working with a non-compatible program, you can still do a certain amount directly. You can also create your own commands and things like that. I'm just going to very briefly just talk a few just minor things here. I know I'm going over time already, unfortunately, but just a couple of things I just wanted to point out very quickly. Under the vocabulary tool here, if there is a word or a phrase that you want to teach the computer, you can add it in here. So for example, my name in Irish is Sheila. So I can click on it here. It's not going to be the same as the English spelling. Ooh, where are you going? Oh yeah. So speller type the word here. So I'm just going to type it in. So S-I-L-E. Spoken form, I can pop it in. S-H-E-I-L-A should go in. And I can train it on the pronunciation of this. So if I've got a particular way of saying a word or phrase, click add. Sheila. And I can just simply click save there now. If you have a lot of vocabulary you need to input in one go, you can actually import a list of words or phrases. So we can take it from a Word document or any text document. You can bring in a word list in. So for example, if you're studying Romeo and Juliet for the junior cert, you could take the Wikipedia entry. Wikipedia is useless for facts, but it's actually really good for vocabulary purposes, and import a list there. I did also want to mention the playback and read that options here under audio. Playback will read back what was written in the person's voice that was dictated in. So for example, this could be really useful for maybe a teacher to kind of figure out, is that what the person actually meant to say, or did the product pick it up wrong? So really nice to hear it back in the student's own voice. Read that will read it back in a computerized voice. So it's really good for self-editing if the student wants to listen back to their work in a different voice than their own, because if they hear it in their own voice, they might think that's fine, but hearing it in a synthesized voice can help them pick up errors. You also have under the help menu there the option for an interactive tutorial, so just be aware of that as well. Just popping back to the presentation. That was a very whirlwind tour of it all, and I do apologise because time is getting away here. So ideas for use and assessment. So if you're trying this out with somebody, you might try it out initially with some simple statements like, today is Monday, we are in Dublin. You might start reading from passages in books. So the idea behind that, it helps them practice things like the punctuations, when to put in your commas, when to put in your full stops, exclamation marks, all that. It helps with the pacing as well, that pausing after each kind of utterance or each comma can help with software correctly picking up what you want to say. So those are kind of very standard, very predictable type of input into Dragon. You might then move on to something that's a little bit more creative. So you could do something like picture description. So taking a picture off the internet, grabbing a magazine, whatever you like, and asking the person just to talk about the picture. So in this case, this is where you can start picking up on kind of things like, okay, you need to pause there. That sentence has gone on for 3 minutes. That's much too long. You need to think about what you're going to say next and just do that little part of the utterance and remember your punctuation. And the same with retelling stories or events. And then you get to the point where they're doing free writing. So they're literally talking into the microphone, but they have that basic process in the back of their mind about when they need to stop, insert full stops, break paragraphs, all this kind of thing, the structure of their document. And this is where mind mapping can really help them kind of figure out what's in the introduction section, what's your first main point, second, third, and then your conclusion, for example. So some alternative options that are out there, just to be aware of them. There is Dictate in Office 365. It is really around dictation. You can do a certain amount of formatting and it only learns a certain amount with you. So it's again designed for kind of more standard voices. Same with Google Voice typing. Sorry, with Dictate, you need to have Office 365 Online, which is subscription based. It will work to some extent with Windows 11 and 10 offline. Google Voice typing, you do need to be online. All you need is a Gmail account and you can start working with Google Docs. I've had more success with that than I've had with Dictate. You've also got Siri and Apple devices, and I put a link there to some other options as well, including Speak Q, which is kind of more limited but trainable version. It's paid for. So those are all links to the Call Scotland website, which is absolutely fantastic for anybody who wants more information on this. So that was a very quick whirlwind tour of software. Hopefully it was of use, and if there's any questions, please let me know, and apologies for going over time.